her. Thank you so much for being here. This is such a special show. LeAnn is such a special person. And what's really cool about today and today's show, every show I think is special, but I've never met LeAnn. This is the first time I'm meeting her, and she's a very, very, very special person. And I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we will fill the audience in.
Woohoo! Fun! Today's a fun day. So, as she said, I'm LeAnn Taylor, and I'm a mother first and foremost. I have 5 amazing children, and something unique about me is that of my 5 children, 3 of my children were born with something called Fragile X syndrome. This is an inherited genetic disorder, and I didn't even know that I was the carrier until my son was diagnosed at the age of 3, and by that time my next son was already born. So it was kind of an adventure, actually, for about 14 years. And sort of in my evolution of parenting children with special needs, and then coming into some really astonishing spiritual discoveries, it took my life on a very different trajectory.
So the coolest thing to this whole story is also like the synchronicity that I was at an event and I met a very, very close friend of yours, Janine Jones. Mm-hmm. I was reading for at this event, and she told me a lot. As soon as I met her at this event, she said, "You have to meet LeAnn." I only had a few minutes with her, like maybe 10 minutes, and she kept telling me how important it was that I meet you, and you do. She had talked about aside from being a mother and working with these kids with disabilities, and I can't wait to get into that as well. What you've discovered and how I guess it was your calling to really walk that path as a mother to these children. Don't you also do? Oh, there it goes. Don't you also do groups and
yes,
things like that? Tell me a little bit too, because I want to cover like the wide range.
Okay, so let me sort of give you how I came into working in a spiritual way with people.
Yeah.
So when my children were young, they were placed in a professional home, and so my sons were, I think, 9 and 12, and they were placed in a professional home for their profound needs. It had been really a turbulent experience raising them and doing the best that I could, but it was too much. It was too much.
Now, were they your oldest children?
No, they were in the middle.
Okay.
So I have an oldest daughter and the youngest daughter not affected, and then the 3 middle children, 2 boys and a daughter, all with Fragile X syndrome.
And what was the age difference between in those 3 children over a period of a small amount of years, each that grouping?
Right.
So you were bookended by normal children, and then
it's children that were not affected. So I basically had my first 4 children in 5 years. And so they were very close together.
Right.
And then my last child, which was actually a surprise pregnancy, that was 3.5 years later. And she does not carry the gene. So neither my oldest nor my youngest carry the gene, which was a huge blessing. So my 3 middle children, 2 sons and a daughter. So just tremendous challenges. And this is all written in my book, The Fragile Face of God, where I walk really the reader through our daily experience. It's very intimate. It's a very intimate story. But then also it's a very transcendent story. And so amidst the hell, really, of our daily lives, there were transcendent experiences and otherworldly happenings. And this is sort of what changed my heart and also my perspective. And then, so when my children were placed in professional care, my 2 sons, I wasn't living with them anymore. I wasn't raising them. They were not in my home. In fact, 700 miles away in a different state.
Wow.
This is where we were living, and then I moved back to California, and so 700 miles between us, and I had no way of contacting them in terms of their nonverbal. They function at the level of a 2-year-old. No phone calls, no text messages, no emails.
And there wasn't even Skype at that moment.
There was nothing for me to communicate with them.
Right.
And so actually what I did for the first 7 years that they were placed is I would send messages to them every day in my prayers. So I would have my morning prayer every day, and I would say, please send this message to Quinn, my oldest son. And then I would talk to Quinn for just a moment. And then please send this message to Shale. And I would give Shale a message. And I did this for 7 years, just pouring my heart out to them, just in tears. As you know, as a mother,
Right.
there's nothing, as hard as it was raising them, giving them up was harder.
Well, children suffer from separation anxiety, but what people don't realize is a lot of times we have separation anxiety as well.
I know mine was more.
Yeah, because you were responsible,
because I knew the separation. I understood the implications of what had happened. So I did this for 7 years, and one day I was giving this message to Quinn in my prayers. Quinn, I miss you so much. I just want you to be happy. And then a voice answered back, and it said, I didn't come here to be happy. I came here to grow and to evolve. If you had any idea the glory that awaits you, you would have no desire for the shallow materialism of this world, and you would do whatever it took to get there. That was groundbreaking.
I have chills.
My son was 18 years old at the time. This was my first time hearing him. So it was his spirit speaking to me. This day opened the gateways. This was late December 2009, and it opened my gateways. Soon I began communicating with Shale, and then I began communicating with a whole group of people. My mother, who had died when I was 8, my grandmother, my grandfather, my husband's preborn daughter who had died at birth, and the husband that I married later.
Yeah,
and so it was a whole grouping of loved ones and friends and guides and beings and the divine. It was really a floodgate is what happened. But then, so it came in such a wave over about a 2-month period, like all at once, so suddenly. And I actually went off the grid. I didn't make phone calls. I didn't have visits. I didn't go out and meet people. I couldn't talk to anyone. And I couldn't share with anyone what was happening because it was so monumental and you just can't give it words. But I documented all of it, and I have sacred writings and conversations and dialogues.
So was there anybody that you shared this with? Like any friend?
My husband.
Okay.
Only my husband. And so spirit would wake me up pre-dawn, and I would go into my office, and there would be angels there, and there would be the divine, and there would be messages waiting for me, asking me to write them. And so much happened that I won't share here today. But that moment opened my gateways when Quinn began communicating with me. It's spiritual telepathy. And so prior to this, throughout my life, there have been experiences, moments where I pierced the veil, but I thought they were isolated. I didn't understand that I had this ability all the time. For example, when I was 3 years old, I was in a surgery and I had an out-of-body experience. I saw myself in the surgery. When I was 17, my mother came to me in a dream.
And your mother had passed away.
My mother passed when I was 8 of cancer. 17 years old, I'm in her presence. In her presence. And an astonishing communication of love, my spirit to her spirit. Again, I thought this was extraordinary and isolated. And when I was in my teens, I began precognition. I began reading people and knowing things that I didn't know. Again, I thought it was just a kind of an isolated thing here and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then throughout the years raising my children, I would receive impressions or inspirations. I beheld my sons with disabilities peering up to the corner of the room, seeing angels.
Mm-hmm.
They were communicating with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then after they were put into professional care, I had a visitation again with my mother. For 3 hours, she explained to me what had happened, why it had happened, who my sons were in spirit, their role, their calling here for humanity, and all that would transpire. And so, again, I even thought that was isolated, right? This was before the communication with Quinn and Shale.
Right.
Once that happened, it was freedom. It was a permanent, overwhelming walk with all that is. And so it isn't just communicating with spirit. That's why I don't call myself a psychic. I don't call myself a medium.
Mm-hmm.
I can do all those things, but so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, spirit gives me higher teachings, higher truth, And walking, I've been places in spirit. I've been to the other side, but you don't have to die to see heaven. So that's what I teach. And I teach people that anyone can communicate through the veil. Anyone can receive messages. In fact, everyone can. And so that's what I do. I teach classes and courses, and I hold conductions with groups of high learners, and we pierce the veil together. We bring through new information. So it's really kind of a whole myriad of being able to do really everything. It's flexing that spiritual muscle that we all have inherently. And I help people awaken it in themselves and then tap that and learn how to use it.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that your son Quinn used to look across the room. And how old was he when he was doing that? He would look
from the time he was a year old.
Okay, because I remember my son used to do that as a very, very young infant, certainly before the age of 1, or maybe just after.
Right.
Because I remember it happened several times where I looked and there was nobody there.
Right.
And one time I was sitting with him in the dark in the bedroom, and it's like he was doing what he normally does to my husband and myself by like speaking that baby talk.
Right.
But he was addressing someone just to the right of me, but there was no one there.
Right.
So I'm open and aware enough to believe that he was really seeing something. And when he was seeing something in the corner, he was so excited. I was changing his diaper. We were at a restaurant, and it was actually Inn of the Seventh Ray. I don't know if you've been there, but it used to be.
I've heard of it.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And we were changing his diaper, and he was looking up in the corner of the room, and he was like kicking his feet, and he was giggling and laughing, and he would stop and look again, and his eyes would get super wide, and then he'd kick and laugh again.
Yes.
And I looked at my husband and I said, "Oh my God, I think he's seeing something."
Yes.
But that something wasn't on the ground.
Right.
It was in the corner of the ceiling.
Right.
All the way across the room.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what I guess, I mean, I'm definitely going out on a limb here, but I think we are all born with that. And I think that as the skull, which when we're born, it has cracks and fissures and soft spots, that closes so that we can cement in this reality. But perhaps someone with a disability gets to stay in that state.
They do.
And they don't get to share it. They get to, it's like their secret, except that you were able to hear it and communicate.
Right. And so here's what. So yes, you're correct. Babies, they do. There's no veil for them. Same with animals. No veil for them. Sensitive people, no veil for them, or very little veil for them. Now, people with profound disabilities are like infants in that way, in that consciousness.
And they seem that even as they grow up.
Exactly.
I mean, they still have all that raw emotion.
Exactly.
But they don't verbalize, or they're not.
They can't.
And even their bodies work like infants. Like, it's hard for us to control our bodies when we're under the age of 1.
Right. So there's that purity. Now, let's talk for a moment, if we can, about what my mother taught me about my son's disabilities. And basically all those who walk among us with profound impairment. So my sons are higher evolved beings, very advanced, more advanced than me. Okay, so my sons teach me in spirit. The reason for them coming here in the form that they are here, which is profoundly affected, nonverbal, functioning at a very, very, very infantile level, will be this. There's no cure. They will be this way their entire lives. They require 24-hour around-the-clock care, and they can't do much for themselves. They need constant supervision. Now, they are ambassadors to teach us compassion. They are here for us. In truth, honestly, Madison, we are the ones with the special needs. This is truth.
What an inside out thought.
So they are masters, as it were. All of them. Now they know this and we don't. So we coddle them and we teach them, we talk to them like they're babies, and we serve them, and it's very, very extensive and taxing to serve them. And it demands the very best of us. And it brings us to a place of humility and compassion. I know this because if you've ever been in public and seen someone who's profoundly disabled, say they're in a wheelchair and they can't control themselves, immediately what happens to you?
you try to not stare. You try to you know, it's not pleasant,
right,
to be honest.
it's a little painful, right? And it doesn't draw out the deepest, most compassionate side of you. Immediately it kind of strips away all of that facade that we live on, right? All of that seeing each other, oh, I'm fine, I'm great, how are you doing?
Right.
That's not there. That's nonsense, right? Throw it all away. Throw it all away. Who are you really? Right? It's coming to the truth of who we are. It's coming to that higher remembrance of where we're from and exactly the purpose of what we're doing here. That is what happens. That is what happens in the presence of my sons. That's really what happens in the presence of my daughter, and she's higher functioning. She can talk, she can read, she can write, she has her self-care, but there is a pure innocence to her that is very atypical for a 21-year-old girl.
Now, is she also under that fragile X?
Yes, fragile X syndrome.
I've never heard of fragile X syndrome.
Okay, here's the thing. Fragile X syndrome is the single most common inherited form of disability. Even by some estimates, more common than Down syndrome, but Down syndrome, everybody knows what that is.
Yes.
Autism, everyone knows what that is, but Fragile X syndrome hasn't had the media attention. So with my book, I've hoped to change that and to sort of, here's the thing, but it isn't really even about Fragile X syndrome or Down syndrome or autism. It isn't. It's about community. It's about you and me. It's about us as a world community. It's about the evolution of our souls. It's about the way that we choose to arrive here and embody and associate with one another and learn from one another and teach one another and grow together. And that's what it's about.
It's interesting because, you know, sadly, 50 years ago, if somebody had a Down syndrome child, they wouldn't even think to keep it.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times, I guess people are afraid of other people with disabilities.
People are afraid of what they don't understand.
Yeah. But it is true. It's like those children or those people, even with Down syndrome, they have so much emotion.
And so much love.
Yeah.
There's such a purity to them.
Yeah, and whereas we, I think as society happens to us, I'll say happens to us, we start to kind of shut down a little bit, you know, just because we have to kind of fit into the bigger picture,
right?
You know, or it's,
we have to hold the persona.
Yeah, we're more realistic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really so every time I see someone walking with a Down syndrome child, I'm so like my heart is singing because I know that now we see this differently, and because now these people have full lives and they're honored for their emotion. They're so loving. I don't know much about Fragile X, but I know also with autism, I've seen a lot of autistic children. Yeah. We have people today watching that are part of the Bowring Opitz community, which is also another sort of like a degenerative nonverbal. Right. I mean, I can't speak scientifically enough, but those children sometimes only live to 7 or 8. You know, I think the oldest one may have lived into the early teens, but it's another situation where people thank goodness through the internet they're able to connect,
right?
And hopefully from hearing your story, people will open up to the possibility that there's a deeper intuitive spiritual path involved with being a mother of these children as well.
There is. The stewardship is a holy stewardship. Now, so I would like to maybe give some clarity and some context for those who may be listening and watching in relation to having a child born with a disability. First of all, there are no accidents. Second of all,
it's basic spiritual law number one.
Next, there is no tragedy in this. Now, I know firsthand the daily life of raising multiple children with profound behaviors, violent behaviors, profound cognitive impairment, and the obscured personalities that you cannot connect with. I know this. I know very well. I do it daily still. However, They are here exactly the way they are meant to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And they themselves, the spirit of those children, are not disabled. They're, in fact, the opposite is true. Again, they are masters. They are here to teach us. They know full well what they came into. They are fully equipped with everything that they need to bear up the challenges. Now, it is painful for us to watch that. One of the first things that my sons showed me when they began communicating with me, they sent me a vision of them, what happens as they sleep. And at night, as they sleep, their spirits leave their bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and they return to the light realm, where they can replenish and restore and have peace and hope. And that is their home community. That is where they're comfortable before returning again to the waking world. And so this, to me, was a huge relief, learning this about
That they
them.
have that kind of this solace in between being kind of
Exactly.
essentially trapped. We're all trapped in our bodies to some extent, but so that they can have this freedom
From the daily suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
This was such a treasure for me as a mother to learn
Right,
this.
right. So what do you think? So I'm kind of curious. What was the instigator that made Quinn start to communicate with you? Do you think maybe he'd gotten to a certain place in his body as an 18-year-old person on Earth where he matured, even with or maybe your connection matured, or and I also was interested in what happened. What was that like for you, that first moment?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're telling me in retrospect, you were able to put all these pieces
Mm-hmm.
together. Like, oh, this happened to me as a young child. Wait a minute, I'm not my body. I jumped out of my body. And then I had this dream about my mother, and it really felt real. And that happened, and this happened. But it wasn't until you put it all together that you're like, oh, maybe this is just who I am.
Exactly.
Because hindsight is 2020. And
Right.
sometimes when we start to jog all the little points, it's almost like a connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
We start to see, I don't want to knock this over again. We start to see like, oh, well, it was all to get me to where I am today. I
Right.
just didn't see the pieces and parts until it came together.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering why it took so long,
right,
perhaps. And I'm also wondering what that first feeling moment was for you. Did you believe it?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I have never ever heard my son speak. He's never spoken. I know my son's voice. That was my son.
Okay.
Absolutely. There was no question. It was Quinn. I know Quinn. That
Right.
was Quinn.
Right.
And it was in response to my words to him.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it was an instantaneous layering of
right.
what.
In addition to this, one thing that, in addition to the dialogue that came through, it was visions. So I was able to see my sons for the first time without their disabilities in a vision. So I knew them. I knew them now separate from the Quinn and Shale I had known raising them, which was very tumultuous.
Right.
And a bit of disfigurement. And so seeing them in their true form, well, this was a revelation. That is who they are. So why did it take so long? That is a fantastic question. In fact, I've never asked that question. So let's bring it through together.
Since it's the first time we're meeting.
Yes.
This is a completely organic show. That's why I wanted to make that point. And also when Janine told me about you, I mean, you're like totally like, you look like a kid, and you're fun, and I was expecting someone who, I don't know, maybe was like a little bit older with like maybe a lot of heavy jewelry, and you're like fun and light, and
it's just the way I feel. So I'm receiving that the reason it took till my son was 18, not because of his mobility in ascension or his readiness to speak, it was my readiness. It was me coming home. And so think about nearly 7 years of prayer, 7 years of devoted communication, one-sided. 7 years of a profound desire of a mother to reach her sons. Think about that. That's pretty heavy. That is a soul's commitment. During that 7 years, I was finding myself. I was reading. I was writing. I was learning about the art of spirituality, learning about the art of being who I am that had never been, because I wasn't able to. There was, while raising my children, there was no LeAnn. There was no LeAnn. There was no LeAnn. So this period of time, which is the 7 years following that, was really coming home again to what it is I desire to do, to what it is I can do, to what it is the world needs. See that? Okay, so it's nearly 7 years of that communication one-sided, and then Quinn breaking through. And it wasn't just Quinn breaking through, because it was a door opening to everything breaking through. That's what it was. And I'll tell you, it was so home, and it was so delightful, and it was so revolutionary that I heard my son speak that my son doesn't speak, and that being able to transcend our earthly relationships and come to the other side of truth, who I am, truth, who they are, and being home in that space together. They took me to the spirit world. I saw them in spirit. They showed me aspects of the light world, aspects of different worlds, actually. So in this place, my sons and I have a full relationship. There's no boundaries. There's no borders. There are no disabilities. There is absolute freedom, limitless experience with them. And this has been, I would say, okay, there's dictation. So my sons give me dictation, and I share messages. The divine gives me dictation, and I share messages.
Right. And so you actually scribe it. You write it down.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
So
call
you're
that
channeling,
sacred writing.
or yeah.
Exactly, channeling. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I call it mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the phrases out there, I never did identify with any other
title.
No,
Yeah.
I mentor, and I help, and I serve. For the first 8 years that I mentored, I did that for no charge. I just did that for free. And so coming into doing it on a larger scale now, and teaching classes and courses, and bringing those kinds of dialogues through the veil for larger groups of people, it's really bringing everyone home, bringing everyone to that home space.
You know, could I stop you for a second just to have you define, because you talk a lot about the veil.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make it really clear for people what that means. I mean, it sounds very literal, but maybe.
Right. Okay. So the veil is our perceived separation between the mortal world and the eternal world, mortality and eternity. That which is here in the physical form, and that which is spirit, light, heaven, the divine, the angels. That so it's the perceived separation. Now I've learned, since having all this happen to me, that there really is no veil, but what we perceive to be a veil.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. When I had somebody who came on, we were talking a little bit about fairies off camera, and she had said to me that one of the ways that she felt that she saw the fairies was she went to a forest, and she was with her mentor, who told her to relax her eyes.
Right, soft focus.
She had to have a very soft focus, and then, and only then, out of the corner of her eye, could she start to see shapes. It was almost like gossamer, like there were layers between layers.
Right, exactly.
Which makes me think that we're living in such a multi-dimensional reality.
We are. And more people are tuning to it and waking up to it and arising in it. More and more people. So it isn't only our own perception of the veil and a personal readiness, but it's also a humanic readiness. That is to say that in this stage of our evolution as a world population, we are coming to a brighter wakefulness as a consciousness, as a community. And that is the reason why so many people are arising now with the expression of their gifts. It isn't that they're special and they have those gifts. It really is inherent in everybody. And so coming to those gifts, and more people being interested about flexing those muscles in themselves. And then again, being able to wipe away all those barriers of communication. So heaven and earth, one community. See that? It's spontaneous. It's one community. And so that's sort of the way that I lead in my with my clients and my teachings, changing people's understandings about who they are, about what this is, about what we're doing here, why we're here, and how it is that we are eternal beings in infinite expansion. And this is a schoolyard. and that here, this is a home away from home, like boarding school,
Uh-huh.
and our eternal home is
Yeah.
our rightful home,
Yeah.
and that we are always connected in this space right here,
Mm-hmm.
and this is an internal sacred space,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're always connected, and really just coming to the object of asking, seeking, knocking. Those who seek find.
I love how spirituality has taken on another layer of reality now. It seems like the times that we're living in,
Yeah.
whereas before, like, you know, when I first started doing tarot in the late 90s, everything was a little bit more ethereal and kind of projected out there. And now we're living in a time where it's a lot more real. Things are a lot more grounded. We've got Pluto and Capricorn. I don't know if people often talk about that, but we're really in a more of a like things are more put into context in a more realistic base.
Right.
But it's also what it's doing is it is awakening more people to their gifts, and it's becoming it's taking it from here and it's making it the mainstream.
Right.
For the people that are open to that.
Right.
I'm noticing that because I wasn't sure. For a while, it felt like people weren't so spiritually into talking about things. We went through some economic downturns, and things got kind of the focus kind of shifted. But now it's coming back in a different way, and I think it's lovely, and I think it's more necessary, and I think it's probably more effective.
More common, and also more truthful. I think that there's a lot of, as you say, yes, we are absolutely evolving, and as we do that, we're sort of like the things that have been that didn't serve are falling away. Certain mentalities, certain rigid mindsets about religion or God or spirituality, those are just falling away. We're coming to a truthful place about what's real, about what's ancient and eternal, and about what's here now. And that it's so fresh. It's just so fresh.
I want to also mention something when you talk about Quinn going to sleep and both of your sons going to this other place where they're whole and they're normal. I don't know how many of the guests know about this, but there's aura pictures where you can go to a place where they take a snapshot of you and it looks at your electromagnetic field. And they have taken pictures of people who have lost a limb.
Right. And the limb is still there.
The outline of the aura is still there, as if it's their arm with fingers and elbow.
And they feel it.
And a very close friend of mine lived with this girl who had been in a car accident and had lost her arm. And she was a stand-up comedian, by the way. She was great. But one of the things she would tell my friend Kelly is that sometimes it would itch.
Right.
And she said the only thing that would help is she would take a metal clothing hanger and she would itch it she would scratch it with this clothing hanger where it was itching her, and it would feel better. So so it's funny. And I also, it also ties in with acupuncture because you're dealing with metal with the electromagnetic field. And I know that I've known acupuncturists that have actually put towels, if somebody's lost their legs from their knees down, they've rolled towels, they've put the needles in those towels, and it still conducts the appropriate energy sources and helps people. So we are complete. Our bodies are just the outer part. Yes,
it's the jacket. We're wearing a jacket. That's all it is. It's so, and I always say this too when I teach. Doesn't it make sense? Well, of course, but of course we're spirit. Of course we're spirit beings. Of course we can communicate. Could we not? Is that what the light realm is? Just some mysterious, remote, far away, obscure, off limits? No, this is family. This is community. We are eternal beings. We are a community of eternal beings, and it's infinite. Yes, we can speak with each other. Of course we can. Of course we're spirit. Yes, and of course we can travel to other places. Of course we can see and hear and feel more than what we can see and hear and feel. Of course we can. So I think when people hear it that way and they kind of get it that way, it's like, oh yeah, then it's not so weird, hoodoo. It's not strange like it used to be seen. It's just common.
Yeah. Well,
That's where we're
hopefully.
going. That's where we're going.
Yeah, I know you teach classes in awareness of humanity
Yeah.
and where we're going as a society, and I'd love for
Right.
you to talk about that.
Yes. Okay. So Spirit calls it the new dawn. So that was
Mhm.
how it was taught to me through the veil. The new dawn. Basically, it's a coming of age, not only of the planet itself, which we know has a female spirit inside. This planet is her body. Like, this is your body. This is
Well, they
my
do say
body.
Mother Earth.
Yeah. It's a spirit. She's a female. And so the name Gaia, as was taught to me, is a nickname,
Uh-huh.
and it means beloved.
Uh-huh.
So she is coming of age, as it were, like a fetus in the womb. And right now she's turning. She is literally turning.
I've never heard this before. This is fast. I'm so glad we didn't discuss this before you came. This is interesting.
Yeah. So she's literally turning in, like a baby preparing to birth.
Uh-huh.
So she will birth. And when this happens, as humanity is becoming more enlightened and ready to operate, not just learn about sacred things, but operate as a spiritual society in a sacred dialect. So even our language will change. As this happens simultaneously together with her and us, we will transform as a people. This is the new dawn. Now, the new dawn isn't a calendar. It's not on a clock. It's not a time frame or a season. The new dawn is here. And it happens spontaneously in everybody. And as it happens in everybody here, it becomes embodied here. And we begin speaking differently. It's already started. And we begin seeing things differently. It's already started. And we begin listening differently. It's already started. And so we begin operating differently. And so it is, and it has begun.
So when you talk about speaking differently, are there some signs that that's occurred?
Okay, so I'm sure you've noticed this, but in your ascended dialogues, in your moments when if you're teaching or doing a session with somebody,
Mhm.
and spirit is channeling through
Right.
you, words come that are not your own. Words
Right.
and phrases that are not in the dictionary. Words that are variations or iterations of words that we use, being used differently in a way that we don't use them.
Mhm.
This is how it starts. It's sort of like the transition language, as it were.
So you're talking about people being more vessels for channeling or for being open to what they're.
But I'm actually even speaking about the language.
Mm-hmm.
Because every new evolution is always carried by a language, a new language. Think about it. What is language? Vibration, a charge.
Yeah.
It goes into the field.
Yeah.
This is what has been created by our former language. Can a new earth be created by our former language? No.
Probably not.
Because this is what is created.
Okay.
Therefore, a new language must become, and it is becoming organically and spontaneously in us as we speak in groups and gatherings of ascended dialogue. That's how it's happening. And so I notice this a lot even with my clients and my as they come to my classes and they begin speaking that same way. Spirit, it changes the dialect of the mouth, and so puts forth a new charge, which is creating a whole new world.
Well, dialect is constantly evolving and changing. I mean, if you look at Shakespeare, we can hardly understand it, and that was only 450 years ago.
Exactly.
So, yeah, we're constantly evolving. But I thought some of that had to do with technology today, because people just are writing, instead of writing YOU, they're writing the letter U. Or
right. It's sort of I would say it's like a scratch. All of that texting and messaging, it's a haphazard language. It's like a scratch. But there's a higher intuitive presence in the mouth that we know as we come closer.
So we're all
we're
all more connected than we used to be.
Yes,
getting more
pockets of us.
Pockets of
people
us.
who are awakening and arousing to that.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, how often do you speak with Quinn, and your other son is
Shale?
Okay.
So
is it spontaneous, or do you set it up to happen, or
spontaneous?
Okay, so
anytime,
they just pop
anywhere.
in.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yesterday I was driving home from the Bay Area, and I reached out to them and told them about this conversation that you and I would have today.
Yeah.
And this lovely dialogue, and I said, just please be with us. So I can feel them, like they're always with me. Always with me.
And how are they with each other?
So they do not live in the same house. They are very turbulent in their behaviors, and they can't be together because it becomes violent.
It's
when
funny
together.
because when I was looking at your photos, they're holding hands, weren't they?
Right. That's why that photo is so, I use it everywhere. It's so extraordinary. Their spirits are best friends. This is what my mother told me. But in life, in body, they're not compatible. They just fire each other.
Well, maybe they just have so much energy coming from each of them that it's combustible.
So powerful. So powerful. Yeah. So they don't get along. But that moment was an angelic breakthrough.
Wow.
Yeah, an indicator of this is who we are.
Wow.
Yeah, in fact, so as they taught me, if I could share this, it's
so
wonderful and exciting. So Quinn's my older son by about 2.5 years.
And how old is Quinn today?
He's 26.
Right.
And Shale's 23, almost 24. So Quinn is a very ascended master. Shale is also very advanced, but Shale's spirit sought to learn from Quinn. So like Quinn is his mentor.
Yeah.
So Shale learns from Quinn, even though they're both very advanced. So they designed to come here as siblings in the same family line, and that they chose me to be their mother. So isn't that interesting though? I love the fact that Quinn is sort of like the mentor, and he's the most violent, the most turbulent. He is the most wild, I would say. He's like 10 kids. Raising Quinn was like 10 kids in one. Shale is a little more gentle. He's more personable. He will look you in the eye. He will hold my hand. Isn't that interesting? So, and Shale has his spirit. He loves to travel. He loves to learn of other cosmos, other planets. He's taken me to other planets. Quinn is, there's so much I could share, but I don't want to give it all away. I'm actually working on my second book right now, where I talk about where they took me, what they showed me, what they teach me, and who they are in spirit, and their message for humanity.
Do you think when you talked about how they have this reprieve, I guess, where they go to another place when they're sleeping, do you think they do that together, or do you think they do that separately?
I saw them together.
You did?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. Yep. I saw them together do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's only the energy that they're forced to contend with here on Earth that creates that combustion.
It's the genetic, right? And then being together, it's Quinn's behaviors, Shale's behaviors, and how they strike each other.
Yes. It's almost like two magnetic things mixing together.
Not compatible.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So it must have been shocking to you to have 3 children with this.
Yes.
And where's your daughter?
So my daughter lives at home with me.
Okay.
And I'm raising her. And she's an angel. She is just an angel. So really quick, I want to share something interesting with you. And this is in my book, The Fragile Face of God. So when my oldest daughter was about 3 and Quinn was just little, 1.5 or so, Jade said to me, "Mommy, Quinn's an angel." She didn't know what an angel was. She didn't have that vernacular. Quinn? You mean Quinn, your brother? Mommy, Quinn is an angel. And then years later, Quinn and I had Shale, and then I had Faith. And Faith, when she was about 3, about the same age, she said, "Mommy, Quinn is an angel." And I said, "Wait, what do you mean? My brother is an angel. And what about Shale? Shale is an angel."
Wow.
So,
and how old was she at that time?
She was about 3, and she was late in her development, so she barely learned to talk.
Wow. And that was one of the first things she said.
Right.
Without really knowing what she was saying.
No, and she never knew. Yeah. She didn't never knew what Jade said about her brothers.
Yes.
I had never said that.
Yes.
Just from the mouths of babes.
Yes. Well, it's interesting what children tell their parents.
Right.
When they're still.
They are in the know.
They are.
Children
they really
will lead.
are.
Children will lead.
And it's so important for all of us to kind of come back and to just come back to that place where we can, if any of us remember being children and having those insights. I mean, you had the dreams about your mother after she passed, but I mean, children that have imaginary friends and children that can see things that adults can't see, because I guess it really kind of completely shuts down around what would you say if you had to guess, like 3 or 4?
When they develop not only language, I would say actually later than that.
Do you think so?
Yeah, they start, I think it depends on the child. It depends on the child. When they start talking, that's kind of when they can communicate. It's about the readiness of the adults that surround them, really.
Yeah.
But as they become more, 8 years old is a big trigger.
Yes.
8 years old is a huge shift in awarenesses and consciousness.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we were going to ask you too about your creative processes with your writing.
Sure. Okay. So give me an example.
Just a lot of it, I know that you're saying you're actually getting it through spirit.
Right.
And I was wondering, how much do you feel is you and how much do you feel is spirit coming through?
When I do messages or when I do sacred writings or when I write my book?
With your book.
Okay. So when I wrote my first book, The Fragile Face of God, I spent, 5 years. It was 5 years. I went through all my journals. It was all really documentation and timelines. But the last 6 months of writing that book was my mother's spirit. And she gave me just a floods and floods really of wording and phrasing and memories and experiences and information. And I knew that. So that's why in my book, I say she's my ghostwriter, literally. So my mother was my ghostwriter. Now, when I do what I call sacred writing, which we meet every couple of weeks in groups all over the world, people join in and we bring our sacred journals and we channel messages.
Wow.
So we pose a question and then each person receives a message and we write that down. And then at the end of the evening, we share our messages. That is 100% dictation. So we receive dialogue through the veil and we document it and we share that. That's 100% channel.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Too. So when you're with this group and you're doing these writings, do they talk about where humanity is going or
all kinds of information?
Is that coming through?
So I listen.
Do you want to share some of that?
I listen for the question. Yeah. And then they prompt me with the question to ask so they can give me that information. So in terms of where humanity is going, first of all, let's talk about who's being born right now. And in the last 10 years or so, who has been born. These spirits are called the pure ones. And it's not all of them, but many, many, many of the children born in the last 10 years. They're ancients.
So is this like the indigos? The indigos were
before them.
Okay.
The indigos were sort of changing the chemistry.
Okay.
Their role was to change the rivers of chemistry on this planet and in the human channels of communication. The pure ones are ancients. They are divinities. They are divinities. They are masters. And they are coming with the most astonishing explanations and descriptions and information.
So when you say the ancients, sorry to cut you off, are you talking about, like, when I think of ancients, I think of Stonehenge. I think of...
Okay, let me clarify that. Ancient, eternal ancients, eons. They have been ascending for eons. So spiritually ancient, as it were. Spiritually ancient. And they have been in other worlds and they are here to lead. They are here to lead. They come after the chemical composition has been changing in our world, in our energy fields, and they are here to fulfill a promise. And the promise is to conduct a new world. A new world, a new enlightened culture, a new enlightened community where there are no veils, where everyone is fully awakened, where we know our eternal heritage, where we know our divine birthrights, where this is common conversation, where our technologies can multiply exponentially, where we go from clunky metals and computers and machines and pieces to a whole different way of technology that is full of light, that is boundless.
That sounds so good.
Where we travel by light, we communicate by light, where there is no distance. This actually just came through a few days ago in our writing. What we know is distance, meaning 700 miles across the continent. There will be no more distance. No more distance. There will be instantaneous travel, instantaneous communication. We will no longer be in the linear of our understandings and in those boundaries. We will be boundless. as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So that's coming, and it's not Star Trek or Star Wars. Although it's interesting, there. If you look at those stories in those films, there was some enlightenment there too, because I think they were given some hints about what's coming.
Well, I always think that's true. I always
Yeah.
think that if you want to see the future, or you can see pieces of possibilities of the future, look at the art.
Exactly, because artists are
imitates
inspired,
life.
right?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of artists, a lot of creatives are getting it through. They're getting it through the higher. They people don't realize they're doing it, but one sign that you know that you're doing it is that you lose sense of time.
Right. It's almost like you're suspended.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of being suspended.
And a lot of people say, oh, I just paint, and all of a sudden like 5 hours has gone by, and that's how you know that you're tapped into the divine, and you're producing something that was inspired beyond you. So but yeah, the movies are so interesting, and I have been thinking a lot astrologically, because we're in Pluto and Capricorn. In 2023 we go into Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is all about vision. It's a visionary vision. It's all about electronics. It's all about this heightened area of just everything. It could be about space travel, and what you're talking about, instantaneous. I love how you're talking about it being tied into light and love and community and society, because the other side of technology could go towards too much technology, which could be separation or more of a coldness and a dehumanizing. So my hope is that it really is used in a way of more connecting, because we are here to evolve.
Right. So here's kind of how it will be. People will gather. They're doing it now.
Okay.
People will begin to gather in more and more places, more and more groups, in larger gatherings. In these gatherings, kin to kin, people with like vibration, which is gathering with those who are ready to ascend, correct? Okay, so as we begin gathering, in those synergies of gatherings and people who are devoted to enlightenment and growing quickly, right? The technologies will birth from there. The knowledge will birth from there. They will create what's called cities of light. And this is going to be happening all over the world, honestly. Several on this continent, all over the world. Cities of light, founded grassroots, not from the top down, from the bottom up. That's how it's going to happen. And those technologies and those teachings and those understandings and evolutionary knowings will be birthed in those cities of light. It's happening now. It's happening now. So that's how it will go. And the rest of we don't call them really slower vibrations. We call them novice frequencies. Okay, so the novice frequencies will be doing their own thing. It's sort of like like a partition, two
I get
it,
like
right.
I see.
Yeah,
I see. So sort of like a layering effect, maybe within the same space, but one is not dealing with the other.
People who are not yet awake, or who do not choose wakefulness and do not choose love and transcendence, they have a different choosing. They will also congregate.
Yes.
See that?
Yes, yes.
And it's already starting. Do you see? It's
already
starting.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely becoming a lot more polarized.
Yeah.
So there is more of and people are gathering.
Right. And here's what's so immense and amazing about those who are gathering in the light: that we conduct and we pray and we aid those who are not in the light. And that is to say that it will only take 1% of the world's population to ascend the entire population. 1%.
That's really great.
1%. Yeah.
That's a really cool idea, because I thought you have to pull up the bottom to get. Wow.
Those who ascend first will bring the rest this way. And that is a service, labor of love.
Right. Well, that's why spiritual people are of service.
Yes, exactly. That's the bedrock of eternal community.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you just let people know where they can find you? I think we've actually done pretty well filling the hour.
Yeah, how it's spontaneous and it goes so fast.
And thank you so much for coming and making the trip over here. And I'm so grateful to Janine for connecting us. That was so intuitive of her.
Orchestration.
Yeah, because I wasn't doing this podcast when when she told me about you.
Mhm.
And now I'm doing the podcast, and I'm looking for people that have messages, and all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, I think it'd be great to have you. And it was like she told me that, and it filled such a higher purpose, and plus that now I know you. So
thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation to come and converse, which is absolutely lovely. And as it always works when spirit is present and the light is upon us, that we just flow, and it's just a river of hope. And thank you so much for that invitation.
And the light is really upon you. We somehow we thought we were going to completely avoid the sun, but we didn't.
We love the spring.
But the light is upon us.
Thank you, exactly.
But yeah, I hope that people that have a similar experience, and even people that don't, will look at others with disability and see the whole people that they are.
Yes.
I hope that the Boehring-Opitz syndrome community was able to get something out of this. I hope they're tuning in. And I think you should let people know where they can get your book and where they can find you.
Yeah. Okay, so my book is called The Fragile Face of God, and you can find it on Amazon. Also my website, which is LeAnnTaylor.com, LeEann Taylor.com. So there's my book and my story and my mentoring. You can dedicate time with me if you'd like, a session, classes. And then generally, again, on Amazon to read the book, but have a box of Kleenex. Most people read it in one sitting, and it's lovely but intense. It has the best of both worlds. So,
well, it sounds like it's filled with love.
It is a message of love. Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Wonderful,
coming.
Madison.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. Next week, I'm going to have a matchmaker come on.
Fun! Awesome!
And we're going to be doing an out-of-the-box conversation about soulmates versus life partners versus, what it's like to do online dating today. And so join us next week. That's going to be Saturday at 3. And thank you again for joining us. This is Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison. My guest today was LeAnn Taylor, and you can find her at LeAnnTaylor.com. Is that right?
Yep.
LeAnn.
Thank
Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week.